I want to bring in ProPublica reporter Justin Elliott. He's reported on one of the president's attorneys who is not seeking security clearance. Justin, a really fascinating set of pieces here. Let me start by asking you, Marc Kasowitz was hired, just so everyone knows, to be Donald Trump's personal attorney on the Russia investigation. But you write that he doesn't have security clearance, and he's probably not going to seek it. Why?
Yeah. So my colleague Jesse Eisinger and I talked to 25 people that have worked for or know Marc Kasowitz. We also talked to Kasowitz's spokesman, and they told us that not only does he not have security clearance, which means he can't look at classified material that, as we understand it, is involved in the Russia case. He also said that he's not going to seek security clearance. We reported that one of the reasons he may not be seeking security clearance is he's had a recent history of alcohol abuse. When they're doing the clearance process, one of the things they look for are problems like that that could show sort of poor judgment or things that could make you vulnerable to blackmail. We spoke to a bunch of lawyers down in D.C. who do this kind of work, and they all say when you're dealing with sensitive cases like this, as the attorney, you need clearance. So it really raises the question of how can Marc Kasowitz represent President Trump in the Russia case if he can't see any of the classified material that's involved in the case.
Yeah. So you just answered my next question. I mean, some people might say, well, so what? He can get the general idea of what might have taken place, even if he doesn't have that exact security clearance to look at those documents. But you say, the folks you've talked to say, it's just not possible to mount an adequate legal defense without it.
Yeah, I mean, we quoted Bob Bennett, who's a longtime Washington lawyer in our story, who himself has had clearance, who said he can't imagine how you could represent Trump in this case without clearance. You know, some of the memos by Jim Comey, the fired FBI director, describing his interactions with Trump, Comey testified that some of those actually are classified. So if you're Trump's lawyer, presumably you'd want to know, okay, what did the president say to Comey? What do we know about any sort of possible collusion between the campaign and Russia last year? You'd want to know all of that, and some of that is going to intersect with classified material. So it raises the question of what does this representation actually look like? We asked Kasowitz and his spokesman. They declined to sort of get into any kind of details about how they're representing the president. They also, by the way, denied the sort of personal problems, the alcohol problems, but we're confident in our story.
Just so we know, what are the steps to getting security clearance in a situation like this?
Yeah, so it's actually a really rigorous process. So if you, for example, were getting a job at the White House and your job was going to involve seeing some classified material, you fill out a form. It's a very long form. It's called an SF-86. It asks you about sort of the deepest and darkest corners of your life. You have to disclose drug use, problems with alcohol, mental health problems, any kind of contacts with foreign government officials. That gets handed over to the FBI, who then does a background investigation. They talk to your neighbors. They talk to people you've worked with. They really sort of go deep in your life. And again, they're looking at, is this somebody who could be compromised by a foreign intelligence service? Right. That's one of the main things. Or is it somebody that we can trust with the nation's secrets? Right. If you pass that, then the agency that's hiring you decides, okay, this person can get clearance or this person can't get clearance. So that's the basic process. But again, Kasowitz has not gone through that process.
So you have also reported that Kasowitz threatened a private citizen who emailed him and urged him to resign. Kasowitz responded to that email with a profanity-laden tirade. But on Monday, Press Secretary Sean Spicer said the White House still has confidence in Kasowitz. We know the White House has also hired Ty Cobb to be in-house special counsel to handle Russia-related matters. Explain to us, Justin, what's the difference here? I think for people listening, it can get a little confusing. What is the role here of a personal attorney in this situation versus a White House special counsel?
Right. It's a very good question, and I think some things are still a little bit murky, but as President Trump's personal lawyer, Marc Kasowitz, his client is just President Trump. He's looking out for the interests of President Trump. If President Trump had an associate or an employee on the campaign, let's say, that perhaps did something wrong, then Marc Kasowitz is trying to protect the president. He doesn't care what happens to the president's, say, former staffer. The White House counsel's office is an office in the White House that deals with a range of issues. It's really, they're more the, I mean, they work for the president, of course, as everyone in the executive branch does, but they're the lawyers for the institution. They do things like handle judicial nominations, handle the nomination of a Supreme Court justice. They help vet White House personnel, and then they're also giving legal advice to the president. But I think it's fair to say they have sort of a broader remit than somebody that President Trump is hiring, and they're government employees, whereas Marc Kasowitz is not. He's a private attorney in New York City who has worked for President Trump for many years.
So then, two follow-ups then. So could there theoretically be a situation where a personal attorney's interest in protecting a client could conflict with those interests of a White House counsel?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very good question. I mean, I think one of the confusing things happening this week is, as you mentioned, the White House announced they're bringing in yet another attorney, Ty Cobb, who's a longtime Washington lawyer, and he will actually be joining the White House counsel's office. So he will, assuming that all goes through, he'll become a government employee. His job has been described in a way that was quite similar to the way Marc Kasowitz's job was described when President Trump retained him as his outside lawyer. So exactly how they're going to be working together, whether they're going to be working together, whether there are conflicts there, I think these are all sort of still live questions.
Yeah, and whether or not Marc Kasowitz might be on his way out, we don't know at this point.
Yeah. The White House says they're standing by him, but it's unclear.
Wow, fascinating. Yet another chapter to this still unfolding story. Justin Elliott, thanks so much for stopping by. I appreciate it.
Thank you.